Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today I'm going to be showing you how I make arancini, or arancini, however you pronounce it. Anybody who wants to correct me, just stop, don't do it. So this recipe starts with risotto, which is what makes up the base of these deep fried rice balls that we're making. So I've shared a video on this before. I'm gonna walk through this pretty quickly, but the first thing you're going to need is start warming 4 cups of chicken broth. I'm going to start this here, but I'm gonna move it over to my other stove so we can start actually cooking the rice over here. So I have the broth heating over a medium-low heat. It just is important that it stay warm because we're going to be periodically adding it to the rice, and we don't want to cool things down. That's going to slow our cooking process. We want a nice, even cooking throughout this whole thing. So keep your keep your broth warm. All right, so you're going to grab yourself a medium-sized skillet, and we're going to melt 3 tablespoons of butter in this. We'll do that over medium heat. All right, once that's nicely melted, we're going to add our onion. So we're adding 1 cup of either a yellow onion or a sweet onion, whichever you prefer. We're going to cook this until it's nice and softened, and you'll notice the onion is really fine. I recommend doing a really fine chop on this because texture-wise, it just works best. Now, if you wanted to throw in a little bit of minced garlic, you could also add that after the onion is softened. Just cook it for like 30 seconds until it's nice and fragrant, and then proceed with the recipe. All right, once your onion's nicely softened, we're going to add our Arborio rice. You need a heaping cup, or about 200 grams of this rice, and we're going to stir it in until it is all mixed in with the butter and the onion. All of the rice should be moistened, shouldn't appear dry anymore. We're just gonna cook this for like a minute or two until we can smell the fragrance of the rice. We want it to be a little bit toasted. That's really going to help the flavor. All right, next thing that you need once your rice is toasted is we're going to add a 1/4 cup of a dry white wine. Ooh. Listen to that sizzle. Okay, so this we're going to cook in until all of the wine's actually evaporated. You shouldn't see any more on the pan. There shouldn't be a really pungent odor anymore if you smell it. And as for wine, dry white wine doesn't have to be expensive. And on today's episode of How Many Things Can Samantha Mispronounce, I'm going to recommend something like a Sauvignon Blanc or a Pinot Grigio. Not a wine drinker, so one of those. All right, so once that wine's cooked, I'm gonna grab my broth. Don't go anywhere. And I'm going to add like 1/3 to a 1/2 cup of the broth and stir this in. All right, and we're going to cook this until all of that broth is cooked out, and stir frequently. I stir constantly while you do it. Risotto is something where you really need to be standing with the dish the whole time. It's not hard, it just requires a lot of attention. So once that's cooked out, we're going to repeat with more broth and do that until we've added all of the broth. And let me show you how it's supposed to look when it's finished cooking, because risotto really is supposed to have a very specific texture, and visually you'll be able to tell once you've reached that point. I'll show you that. And having one of these pots that has a lip like this is a game changer for neatly pouring. I already had a fiasco where I couldn't even pour right from a spout earlier today, so I really love these pots. They're a great investment. Try to remember to link to them. Someone remind me if you're looking for good pots and pans. So I'm not gonna make you sit through all of this addition process. It usually takes about 30 minutes from start to finish to make risotto, but I will show you once it's cooked completely. All right, let me add my last bit of broth, and I want to mention to you that you may not need as much broth as we've measured out, or you might end up needing a little bit more. If you need more and don't have it, you can use warm water instead. So what we are ultimately looking for is a certain consistency. So if you're pulling a spoon or spatula through the risotto, it is going to roll back in on itself. So here you can see it's rolling back in on itself. Also, we're going based off of texture, so it's a good idea to try a little bit of it. You want to cook the rice until it is al dente, which means it's still a bit firm to the tooth, but it is cooked through. Yeah, we're there. Now, this isn't our taste test yet because we have a couple more things to add, but we will taste test and adjust if needed. All right, let's take this off the heat. So you want to pull that off the heat right away, and we can now add our cheese. You'll need a cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese and a tablespoon of fresh parsley. Stir this in. This smells so good. All right, and in a second, we're gonna do our taste test. I always add a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, mix that in. And then salt is always to taste, because how much salt you need can vary depending on how salty your broth is, or The cheese adds a nice salty flavor as well. So we're just going to taste test. And if it doesn't taste super flavorful, it just needs a little bit of salt. Don't burn yourself. And this doesn't need anything. So what I'm gonna do now is I wanna cool this rice pretty quickly because you can't use it to make the arancini or arancini. Oh, I almost forgot something very important. Sorry. We're also going to add a tablespoon of butter to finish things. And that should ideally go in with the Parmesan cheese, but it's gonna melt just fine for us. It's melting on my counter as it is. We add those 3 tablespoons in the beginning, and then we save a tablespoon for the end, which adds a really nice flavor. And this is just unsalted butter. My gosh, yeah, forget the butter. All right, and as I said, we want this to cool quickly. It has to be completely cooled in order to use it to make our arancini. So to help speed up the process, we're just gonna spread it onto a baking sheet. So I wanna make this today, but you could, of course, make this with leftover risotto. We'll spread it out. This is just gonna help it cool faster. And this is going in the fridge to cool completely before we proceed. So once your risotto is about done chilling and nice and cold, we can start prepping our stations because we're going to need to bread this. So I start with 1.5 cups of plain panko. If you want to use already seasoned stuff, you can, but I'm going to be adding my own seasonings. And one thing I do here that I like to do with my mozzarella sticks as well is I crush the panko even further so it's finer. That way it coats the risotto better. I'm just going to use a rolling pin to do this. You could blitz it in a food processor if you want. And this is optional, but it creates a better breading. I'm actually gonna roll over it too to help crush it. All right, once this is nicely crushed up, I'm going to transfer it to a shallow dish. And for seasoning, I like to add a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a ½ teaspoon of dried parsley, 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, a ½ teaspoon of ground black pepper, and just a 1/4 teaspoon of table salt. We'll mix everything together. You'll also need another bowl with a ½ cup of flour, and then another bowl you'll need to crack 2 large eggs and then whisk them up really well so they're nicely broken up. We're also going to prep our mozzarella. You are going to need 1/2-inch squares of mozzarella. I buy a block, and we're going to go ahead and just cut it into these pieces right here. You're only gonna need like 2.5 ounces of this cheese, so you will not need a whole brick. You're only gonna need part of it. I've even contemplated cutting up string cheese to use before. That would probably be fine. All right, so our station's actually gonna go to the side for just a second. Grab your risotto from the fridge, and I like to go ahead and scoop this into level 1.5 tablespoons. You could put this in a bowl if you want to make it easier. I'm just doing it right on the tray. Just be careful you don't scoop up any foil. And I'm going to roll this into a ball, take a piece of my mozzarella, press that in the center, and then roll it again. Then I'm gonna put this on a wax paper lined baking sheet and grab the rice, press the mozzarella in, and you do want to do your best to get that mozzarella in the center of the risotto. Otherwise, what could happen is if it's too close to the edge, it could end up leaking out while it's frying. If you're going by weights, these are about 30-gram balls before you add the mozzarella. All right, they're all rolled out. So what we're going to do next is you're going to take one ball, roll it through the flour. Sorry, tap off any excess. You don't want a ton on there. Dip it in the egg or roll it through the egg. And when you're rolling it through the egg, you want to make sure it gets entirely coated. Sometimes it can be a little resistant to the flour. Once it's entirely coated, take it over to the panko, give it a nice thorough coating, and put it right back on your baking sheet, and then repeat. If the egg doesn't entirely coat it, then the panko is not going to cling to that spot, and then you'll just have a bare spot, which you don't want. All right, I'm gonna go pop these in the fridge so they can stay nice and cool. And in the meantime, we're going to head over to the stovetop and start heating our oil to fry them. So over on the stovetop, you're going to need a pot for frying. I highly recommend using a thermometer because it's the only way you're going to actually know what temperature your oil is. We've also set up a little frying station here, which is just a baking sheet lined with a wire rack that I've lined with paper towels. This is where the arancini is gonna go after I cook it so that some of the excess oil can be absorbed. So we need to fry in a frying oil. So I recommend a neutral oil. Vegetable or canola oil would work. I've been meaning to try with avocado oil. It's just really expensive. And I'm going to fill this at least 2 inches deep with oil. Now we need to heat this to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, but we don't want to crank up the heat and make it shoot up really fast. So I recommend keeping your stovetop heat just a notch below medium. I keep everything else I need in the refrigerator until the oil is at temperature. So once your oil has reached temperature, grab these out of the fridge and we are going to add them just 2, maybe 3 at a time. We're going to fry them until they're nice and golden brown. I'll do 3 to start. And I like to use a frying spider to remove them when they're finished. So something to keep in mind anytime you're frying is you don't want to add too much at one time because that will bring down your oil temperature and can bring it down really fast and can end up leaving you with soggy deep fried goods, whatever you're deep frying. Another thing I want to mention is you want to monitor your oil temperature and make sure it comes back up to 350 degrees between batches. All right, we're at about 1.5 minutes here, and these are looking pretty good. So here they go over to the last stage of the frying station. And we'll watch the temperature, and then we'll add a couple more. All right, so once you've fried these, you obviously want to enjoy them while they're still warm. I highly recommend serving with a side of marinara sauce. And serve them warm, but don't burn yourself. And that is how I make arancini or arancini, or however you want to say it. You know what I'm talking about. You just watched me make it. Regardless, I really hope you enjoy. If you try this, let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. All right, these are still kind of warm, but. That's amazing. And I'm going to pour this very messily. Oh my gosh. What happened? This isn't my first time pouring. That's how we pronounce it in America. First person to comment on my pronunciation loses. So we can like put this at the bloopers at the end. We have a whole 10-minute video on bloopers.